Hi, welcome to Grade 6, Lesson 7. Today we will be using absolute value to determine the distance between integers on the coordinate plane in order to find side lengths of polygons. Let's get started with number 4. Number 4 says complete the table using the diagram and absolute value to determine the lengths of the line segments. So the first thing that I'm going to do is number my coordinate plane. So I'm going to start in the center, and the center is always 0, 0. Next to it, when we move to the right, they're positive. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And in the left of it are negative, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7, negative 8, negative 9, and negative 10. And when we go up, they're positive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And when I go down, they're negative. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7, negative 8, negative 9, and negative 10. All right, so now that we have our coordinates plane labeled, now we can find the ordered pair of numbers that correspond with each letter of the line segment. So for the first one, it says line segment AB. So the ordered pair, first we're going to start with A. My ordered pair for A, you always start on the x-axis. So I went over to the negative 7. And after I went over to the negative 7, I went up to 8. So my ordered pair for A is negative 7, 8. Okay. Now I have to find my ordered pair for letter B. Letter B, remember x always comes first, so I went over 8. My y is second. I went up 8. So I have my x and y and my x and y. This is for letter A. This is for point B. Okay, now that I have my 2 points, I can go ahead and find the distance between point A and point B by finding the absolute value of each point. Now in each pair, either the x coordinates are the same or the y coordinates are the same. If the x coordinates are the same, then the segment would be vertical. If the y coordinates are the same, as in this one, the y coordinates are the same, then the line would be horizontal, and the line is horizontal. So we can ignore the same coordinates because they just tell us if the line is vertical or horizontal. We're just going to focus on the coordinates that are different. So the coordinates here that are different are the x coordinates and the negative 7 and the 8. So those are the two that we're going to focus on. So I'm going to find the absolute value of the negative 7. Remember, the absolute value brings it back to a positive number. And my second point has the absolute value. We have to find the absolute value of 8. Now, it says that we can subtract the absolute values of the endpoints if the points have the same sign. If the signs are different, like we have here, here's a negative and a positive. If they're different, we add the absolute values. So here, we're going to go ahead. The absolute value of 7, negative 7 is 7, and the absolute value of 8 is 8. So if we go ahead and add 7 and 8, we get 15. So my absolute value is 18, so the distance would be 15. Let's go ahead and do the second one. Letter C. Letter C, I have to go across the Y first, and letter C is 7, and I went up 1, 2, 3. And then we have to find letter G. Letter G, I went over 3 and up 3. Okay, again, we ignore the same coordinates, so we're going to ignore the Y's, and our X's are different, so we have to find the absolute value of the 7 and the absolute value of the 3. And our rules say that if the signs are the same, we subtract, and if the signs are different, we add. Well, here the signs are the same, and since they are the same, we're going to subtract the absolute values. So 7 minus 3 is 4. So my distance here is 4. Okay, let's go on to letters. The next endpoints are C and F. So if I start at my 0, I go across to my X first, and it would be 7. And I crawled up 3. And my second endpoint is F. So I start at 0. I went over to the negative 5. And I went up 3. Again, we're only looking for the endpoints that are not the same, because the ones that are the same just tell us whether the line is vertical or horizontal. Here, since the 3's are the same, we know that it's horizontal. But let's go ahead and find our absolute value. So we're going to find our absolute value of our 7 and our negative 5. Now again, the rule says if we can subtract if the absolute values are the same. These are not the same. If the signs are different, we add. So these signs are different, so I have to go ahead and add. Absolute value of 7 is 7. Absolute value of negative 5 is 5. So 7 plus 5 is 12. Moving on to GF. So I find letter G. Go across the X first. I went over 3, and I went up 3. For letter F, I went over 5, and I went up 3. Okay, again, only focusing on the ones that are different. So we're going to find the absolute value of the 3 and the absolute value of the negative 5. And our rule tells us that if the signs are different, they're different, we add them. So the absolute value of 3 is 3, absolute value of 5 is 5, and 3 plus 5 is 8. So 8 is our distance. The next one, D and H. So letter D to H. I go over to the x first. So D is 5. And I went down to the negative 6. And then our H, I start at the 0 and I go down. Remember that our X, I didn't go anywhere to the right or the left. I stayed right on the line, so it's 0. And I went down negative 6. Okay, so again, we're focusing only on the ones that are different. Okay, so the ones that are different. So I have to find the absolute value of 5 and the absolute value of 0. Now, because 0 is always going to be 0, we're going to add these together, and 5 plus 0 is 5. Absolute value, well, my distance is 5. DE, the letter D, I went over my X first. So for the DE, I went over 5, and I went down negative 6. And then for letter E, I went over negative 1, and I went down negative 6. Okay, again, we're only focusing on the ones that are different. So we have to find the absolute value of 5 and the absolute value of negative 1. And since the signs are positive and negative, they're different. And when they're different, we are going to go ahead and add. So 5, the absolute value of 5 is 5. The absolute value of negative 1 is 1. And 5 plus 1 is 6. Okay. HJ. Okay, so H. H is right on my axis here. So that means I didn't go over to the left or the right on the X. So it's going to be 0. And to find the letter J, oops, let's finish. We have, it's on the O for the X, but I also went down negative 6. That's for the H. Now for the J, I also did not go left or right. I stayed right on the ordinate there. So that stays a 0, and I went up, which is positive, to the 8. Again, we're only focusing on the numbers that are different to find the absolute value. So we have to find the absolute value of a negative 6 and the absolute value of the 8. And again, the rule says if the signs are different, we add. So 8 plus 6 is 14. Our distance is 14. And the last one, our K, our letter K is right here. So in order to find the letter K, we went over to the left to a negative 3, and we went up 8. And then for our letter L, we also went over a negative 3, and we went up 3. So focusing only on the ones that are different, we have 8 and 3. So our absolute value of 8 and our absolute value for 3. And the rule says if the signs are the same, then we have to subtract. So we're going to go ahead and subtract. And 8 minus 3, our absolute value of 8 is 8, absolute value of 3 is 3, and 8 minus 3 is 5. And if you wanted to check that, if we were to count these, we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it checks for our distance. So that is how we find our distance between two endpoints by using absolute values. If the points that we're using that are different have the same sign, we subtract, like this one. And if the endpoints that we're using have different signs, like this, if they have different signs, we add. All right, so now let's move on to question number 5. Name 2 points in different quadrants that form a vertical line that is 8 units in length. Okay, so we have to have 2 points in different quadrants that form a vertical line, and it has to be 8 units in length. So vertical means it has to go up and down. And in order for it to be going up and down, that means the x-coordinates have to be exactly the same. So my 2 points, the x-coordinates have to be the same. So I have an x and a y, a x and a y. So I'm just going to pick the number 2. Because if my x-coordinates are the same, then it would be vertical. Now the other direction, it has to be in 2 different quadrants, so that means it has to cross over, and it has to have a length of 8. So I am going to choose 2, so I went over 2, and we're going to go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to choose 2, 5. And since it's vertical, meaning going up and down, and has to have a length of 8, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is on -3. So here is the line that I just added. So let's see if it fulfills all the requirements. It does go through 2 different quadrants. It goes through quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Remember, these quadrants are 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it does go through 2 different quadrants. My line is vertical up and down. Now let's see if it's 8 units in length. So just like we did on the top, we only focus on the 2 numbers that are different. So we're going to find the absolute value of my 5, the absolute value of my 3, and we said that when the signs are different, if the signs are different, you add. So the absolute value of 5 is 5, the absolute value of 3 is 3, so 5 plus 3 is 8. So that checks. And the next one says name 2 points in the same quadrant, so now it has to be in the same quadrant, that forms a horizontal line, and it has to be 8 units in length. So the same quadrant, so let's start down here in quadrant number 3. Since it has to have the same quadrant and a horizontal line, remember horizontal means the y's now have to be the same. So the y's have to be the same. I'm going to use a spot down here just because we have a lot of space. So I'm going to put my point on -3, and I'm going to use this line 9 here. So let me go to -3, and let me go across here. So in order to be horizontal, that means the y's had to be the same. So I used -9 and -9. So that will make my line be horizontal. As you can see, it is. My line is horizontal. So let's see what I did. I went over to my x has to go first. So 1, 2, 3. I went over 3. So this First point would be A. This would be 3, -3, -9. And my second point was on, I went over -8 and -9. So now let's see if this fulfills our requirements. Is it in the same quadrant? Yes, it's all in quadrant number 3. Is it horizontal line? Yes. And is it 5 units in length? So let's see. We're going to focus only on the numbers that are different. So here I have -3 and -8. So we have to find the absolute value. And in order to find the absolute value, these have the same sign. And when they have the same sign, we have to subtract. So since 8 is bigger, I'm going to do -8 and -3. Since they have the same signs, and I'm supposed to subtract, that's why I wrote 8 first, because that order matters. So -8 becomes 8 for absolute value, and -3 becomes 3. So 8 minus 3 is 5. So yes, that fulfills our second requirement. So that is how you find your endpoints, your location, using absolute value. Thanks for listening. I hope this helped you. Bye.